Hey everybody, Don Zoldi here. Welcome back to your Full Tilt Tech Industry Leadership Talks podcast. We have with us today Don Berchoff from TruWeather Solutions. Don has been a great friend of all of our shows. He's been on the Donna Drones multiple times. He's been on the Full Crew. And now we get a peek behind the curtain into his leadership philosophy and his background. So Don, we're so excited to have you with us today.
Hey, Dawn, I'm really excited to be here, and really a pleasure to be talking with you today.
So Don picked this theme that I think is really enlightening, because if you know anything about Don, we call him the Weather Don. He's a passionate kind of guy, and his theme is leading with your passion. So Don, tell us first why you picked this theme.
Well, I think my whole life has been built around a passion for weather, and most people who get to know me recognize that, I am who I am. My focus is on solving a really tough problem, and that's the challenges of understanding how to forecast the weather and communicate that in a way that's going to improve outcomes. And it all started when I was 7 years old, and really that's what drives me. And so everything I do revolves around that, and the way I operate and the way I work with people, and my true internal way of behaving is all around this passion for weather. And so once you have a passion and a vision for something, it's really easy to stay on principles and follow through, and that gives me a lot of authenticity with my coworkers and my colleagues and my partners once they get to know me.
Well, what I think is really incredible is that as early as the age of 7, you already had a passion for weather, which I just find it to be really unique. So let's go back in time, Don, and let's talk about in the beginning. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and your childhood. And I know we have a really cool slide with some pictures that will roll while you're talking. So go ahead, Don. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, well, I grew up in New York City, in Queens. It was a pretty typical family lifestyle in Queens. I had a very active lifestyle because I lived in an area where back in the early 1970s, it was relatively safe. At 8 years old, I was running around the neighborhood like I owned it. I didn't have parents helicopter parenting me, which was probably good. I think that's what really helped grow me as a person I am. Had to deal with a lot of different challenges. I was a Met fan. And we had Yankee fans in New York City, and if you were in Queens and you were a Yankee fan, you had to deal with that. And if you're in the Bronx and you're a Met fan, you had to deal with that, and that was tough. It was a tough upbringing, but weather really drove me, because we had a snowstorm in 1969. It was the Lindsay Day snowstorm, and that I just wanted to understand how this happened and why it happened. And I used to listen to Joel Myers on AccuWeather back in on 1010 Winds. This was in the beginning when AccuWeather was the first weather company that really took National Weather Service products and tried to customize it and do better forecasting. And that all came together at the same time with my interests, and the media was starting to get more involved in weather. And I just feel very fortunate that that I really landed on this at such a young age.
Those pictures were amazing, and I could just imagine the little Don sitting at the window watching the snowstorm, thinking to himself, I wonder why this is all happening. And so there was a picture in that collage, Don, where you had a chef hat on, and your partner in crime and colleague Lisa told me I have to ask you about this story. Tell me about the jelly in your veins story, where you're in this baker's hat, and how it's weather related.
Well, so that was in college. As I grew up, I knew I wanted to be a meteorologist. There's a lot of diaries and things that I think you have pictures of that I used to write when I was a kid. I even wrote a report in 7th grade of what about a career, and I had to do my research on meteorologists, and so I wrote that report. But the thing is I was going to college. I was going to SUNY at Oneonta for my meteorology degree, but in the summer I was working at Dunkin' Donuts. And what was interesting is, you know, I always do anything I did, I always did the best I could do, right? And I learned as a baker in Dunkin' Donuts, especially in the 1970s, when we used to bake the donuts on premise, and we used to have to cut them all and fry them all. And I learned pretty quickly that, you know, you had to get your donuts to rise a certain amount. Otherwise, you get the screen marks on them and they become greasy. And the proof boxes that they gave us and the instructions they gave us, they were just very black and white. And I learned working over the course of a summer that the humidity changes outside meant that you had to change the way you let your dough rise. And I wouldn't even put my donuts in the humidifier on some days. And they would come in and yell at me, go, why aren't you putting those in the humidifier? I said, because this is going to be fine. Just trust me. So I actually figured out, I had the best donuts on Long Island, according to my district manager. And I had a finisher who was used to take the donuts and have to put the jelly in them and all that. And I used to yell at her if she was squeezing my donuts too much, because she was going to cause them to get flat and they wouldn't look good in the case. So after 2 years of working at Dunkin' Donuts, Mickey came up to me, who had a glass eye. You know, he was one of these guys right out of Central Casting, right?
You can't even make this stuff up.
Can't make this stuff up. He had a glass eye. He sits me at the counter. I said, I have to go back to school, Mickey, now, senior year. And he goes, Don, I don't think you should do this. I'll get you set up. You can build the weather programs up at Dunkin' Donuts University. I didn't even know there was a Dunkin' Donuts University, right? And you can make sure that everyone understands how to use. He said, you can't go back to school. You have jelly in your veins. And so after I explained to him, Mickey, I love donuts. I love working for you, but, you know, I have to go back to school now and be a meteorologist. He understood, and that was the last I ever saw of Mickey.
I love that jelly in your vein story, and it has to do with weather. I'll tell you what, Don, it makes sense because how many times I'm in Colorado, and
Right.
So high elevation baking is different than baking at ground level, and it has to do with, honestly, I don't pay attention to those instructions. I probably should. They have beautiful cakes and donuts, like you figured out with the humidity there. But to connect that to weather, that's so hilarious. So, but your passion,
Wait, Dawn. Everything's connected to weather. You know that. Haven't I taught you that in the last couple of years?
Yes, yeah, you've made me an acolyte, to be sure. But let's talk a little bit more, about your childhood, because you had some formative teachers and people in your life, and also formative events that kind of shaped your passion and the way you look at life. So let's hit kind of a couple of the teachers first.
Okay.
I believe you went to Catholic school, and you had a nun.
Hard to believe, right? Hard to believe, right?
I did too for high school. Ukrainian Byzantine Catholic High School, St. Basil's Academy. So, you had a sister, Catherine?
Yes.
In third grade.
Yes.
Tell us about Sister Catherine and kind of how she plays into your story and this theme of living through your passion.
Well, let's just say that that's not one of my brightest moments in life. I think I learned how to write in cursive like a month earlier, and I didn't get my homework assignment signed by my mother that day, and I went to school and forged her name, and Sister Catherine sniffed it out and basically pulled me into another classroom by the ear. And I lived, as I said, I lived in Queens, and you can literally see the Empire State Building from my classroom. And she just told me, if you ever forge your mother's signature again, if you ever do anything like this again, I will throw you through that window in the Empire State Building. And I believed it. I believed it. And I've always been a kind of incorrigible kind of kid. I always was, always went by my own way. And there's a lot of times I had to be corrected, but it never is effective, unfortunately. I still do what I feel is the right thing to do. But the Catholic school upbringing was interesting. I also had, a grandfather who, always used to talk to me about what it was to be a proper young man. But the thing is my family life got really difficult when I was about 8 years old. So we had a a pretty interesting normal life. I had 3 brothers and sisters at that point, and then we had my 4th sibling born, and she had cystic fibrosis, and that changed our whole life. My mother changed, everything changed, and you know, we went into poverty, and you know, I just became more focused on making sure that I never had to live like that. So I think part of my psychosis is, you know, always striving to make sure that I never have to be in that position again. And that drove a lot of independence and a lot of critical thinking about things. And then I got to high school, and I had an earth science teacher, Mr. Goulet, that was really influential in teaching me about meteorology and helping to evolve that passion. But I will tell you that when I got to college, I didn't understand how tough math was in meteorology. Everybody thinks it's just, you know, pretty pictures on TV, but we had to take differential equations, and I almost didn't get through that. I mean, that was a tough time. I wasn't built for the math because I didn't prepare properly. And I had the passion though for weather, which was good. But I had some people at college, Steve Berman, my professor, who he just taught in a certain way that allowed me to track the math. And I had a good friend, Earl Barker, who is a lifelong friend. And really I got through that period. And after I got past that, then it was, you know, there was no real major hurdles anymore to me succeeding in the industry.
Wow. Excuse me. I'm still getting over whatever I got at CES a couple weeks ago, so my voice is a little scratchy. But so Don, you had so many different people in your lives. Some of the ones you've mentioned, the fact that you had, you know, your sister was born with CF, which is just a debilitating and very difficult disease that you know really changed your family dynamics and got you focused on, you know, kind of lasering in more on your passion. And part of that was you kept journals for like 10 years, weather journals. I mean, who does that? I think we have a picture from, you know, so let's show that picture and explain. I mean, how old, what does that say? 8th grade? A career?
Yeah, so that's my paper I kept. For some reason, I don't know how we managed to hold on to that, but that's about a career. I think it said a meteorologist made $15,000 a year when I was in 8th grade in there. And then the journals were, I just paid attention to weather every day. I became almost a weather savant. You know, they talk about, Malcolm Gladwell talks about 10,000 hours. Right. And I definitely attribute my success today to the paying attention to weather I did back then. And back then we didn't have internet. We didn't have the tools we have today. So everything was self-taught. By the time I got to college, I was out forecasting seniors that had already been through the you know, the whole program. And I think that is what gave me a head start, because once I joined the military, I was so far ahead of my peers that I was already working on more advanced things as a lieutenant when they were just trying to still learn how to forecast. And I just think having a head start like that, it's just huge. And if, you know, it gives you so much of an advantage, right? Once you understand your craft and what it is about the basics of your craft, then you can start focusing on other things and be really good at it. So I think that was a big part of why I'm where I am today.
Got it. And you know, there's this, you know, I guess thousands of years old debate, nature nurture. You know, when you think about what kind of people become and what their passions are and what kind of leaders they turn out to be. Just listening to your story, Don, you know, I've always been kind of a nature plus in the nature plus nurture camp, not 100% one or the other. But man, you make a really good case for almost like nature, right? Because just as early in your life as you were inspired by nature and it became such a huge passion for you. And then of course, the nurture part of like all of these people in your lives that start influencing and kind of fanning the flames of that passion, if you will. I would love to ask you this question about education, because, you know, you had that path. It's not kind of funny, but, you know, do I go to Dunkin' Donuts University or I don't go to university to be a meteorologist? What advice do you have for people out there when it comes to schooling or education? I know you've got some great thoughts on this.
Yeah, so It's interesting. When I was in, when I was graduating from Oneonta, it was 1984. I was the meteorology club president. Man, I was the geekiest of the geeks. I didn't know what I was going to do when I graduated, because this was in the Reagan era where they were cutting government, and the National Weather Service went on, basically a moratorium in hiring. And that was one of the major hirers of meteorologists back then. You had four choices. You become a forecaster in the National Weather Service, you become a research scientist, you go into the military, or you work for AccuWeather for $2 an hour at sweatshop wages at that time.
Wow.
That's not a disparagement of AccuWeather. I want to make that clear. But the point is that, the choices were limited, and I had never thought I was going to join the military, because I grew up in Vietnam era in New York City. And if you look at the way New York City treats veterans today compared to how they treat them in the 70s, it's night and day. It's night and day. And so I was not really pro-military, and this opportunity came up where the MEF Center called me in Albany as the meteorology club president and said, hey, can we come out and talk to the folks out at Oneonta in your club? And I was really not really pro doing that, honestly. I had a little bias, but after that I grew up and said, no, come on out. I can't be the one making the gatekeeping decisions. And they came out, and I was sitting in the back of the room like, I'm not going to do this. And by the end of the pitch, and a couple of days later, I was the only one that joined the military. And that military really, even down at OTS, I had some challenges of conforming, right? Because I'm not a conformist. I'm intra-entrepreneurial, right? And so I almost left OTS, and I got sat down by one of my mates and basically said, you got to do this. You're going to be good at this. You got to stay in. So I got in the military, and basically the question at that point became, they kept telling me, you've got to get your master's in meteorology if you're going to be a colonel someday, if you're ever going to be a leader. And that was the thinking back in the 1980s.
Right.
And so I knew that I didn't want to really get my master's. I wanted to broaden, but, they would tell me how to do it. So they sent me off to the University of Maryland for my master's. And in 6 months, I said, I just can't stand this math. I can't stand this. I'm miserable. This is not what I need. And I left. And they all told me, oh, that's it. Your career's done. So I guess the moral of the story is I made colonel. I ran an Air Force base in Central Asia. I led Afghan policy and strategy for the Joint Staff for 2 years, including helping to build the Army. I built big regional weather centers. I mean, it didn't hurt me at all, right? And the point is that I went back, got a master's in procurement and acquisition management, and then got selected for National War College. I was one of the first weather people in like 10 years to be selected. In fact, when I got there, people would say to me, why is a weather person at National War College? And this is true. I had a glass ceiling the whole time going through the military.
I don't doubt it. Hey, I'm going to cut you off because you are a talker, Don. And I want to back up because we're going to talk a lot more about your military career, but I want to glean that nugget out of that that Oneonta story when the military showed up. Like, what is if you were giving advice to people that are listening out there, whether old or young, what would that nugget of wisdom be from that one experience about education or your passion? Like, what did that teach you?
Don't let people tell you what dogma is if it doesn't fit your narrative of where you want to go. You could shape the arc of your history just if you're focused and you're passionate about what you're doing. There's really nothing that could stop you. So do what you feel is good for you. And in terms of education, recognize that life's long, and you're going to be learning. You're going to have a lifelong experience of learning, and that it doesn't matter that you check a box at this particular time, because you're going to have plenty of opportunity to recreate yourself and figure out exactly where you need to go. And if you're destined to be, a really good leader, and if you're destined to really be on the top of your trade, you'll get there. So you got to stick with your passion. Don't let people take you off track because of their narrative or their way they see the world.
I love that. And it ties directly into your theme about leading from your passion. And I couldn't agree more, Don, because I feel like so many young people today feel this inordinate amount of pressure to get a specific degree or to do a certain thing. You know, to me, college is not a jobs program. College is the
Right.
time to figure out what you are passionate about, because from your passion comes your purpose, and everything else flows from that. And I really, I know it sounds corny, but you are such an exemplar of this, Don, and I'm so glad to be talking to you about it for real. You mentioned lifelong learning, and I don't want to move on to your career without touching on that as well. You know, I think there's a ton of research on this. I think if you just look around, you know, when you see a leader out there, it's someone who is always learning throughout their life. How do you continue to learn and grow in this journey that we call life?
No matter how busy I am, and I'm running a startup company, and I can easily work 80 hours a week. I always make sure I do my reading. I always make sure I stay up on the latest technology. Keep in mind, I don't have any formal training in systems architecture, communications, data systems, analytics. I'm all self-taught. And remember, no computers in 1984, and everything, we didn't have Excel and Word. We had to learn. There was no courses, it was the school of hard knocks. And we had to learn, keep learning how to build Excel spreadsheets and do formulas. It was all self-learning. And I think the bottom line is this, is that I was assigned to technology director at the National Weather Service. I had 50 system engineers and software engineers working for me. And I never had formal training in any of that. So, but I could still talk the talk. I understood exactly what it could do. I knew the right questions to ask, and I challenged people to make sure that they were staying in line with those visions. And you just learn through doing and reading and staying up on things. And now we're moving to edge computing and machine learning. And I'm never comfortable. I'm always trying to bleeding edge, and that's an uncomfortable place to be if you allow yourself to get consumed by being uncomfortable. I always tell people, you got to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Well, so true. And I love how you continually challenge yourself. By the way, we have folks out there. Jonathan Songer, by the way, is out there. He says, Don, I'm listening from a base in the Middle East. Plenty of weather out here in the last 24 hours. So, and
Disco, you're on duty.
yep, he
Awesome.
is. Jonathan is normally in our clubhouse. He's not been able to make it the last couple times for the Donna Drones, but we love having him. And be safe out there. Stay dry. Stay safe. Let's talk about the Air Force, because that's a great segue. Honestly, you met this recruiter, and I think you used MEPS. That's the Military Entrance Processing Center. OTS was the officer training school that you ultimately went to. You joined the Air Force. It wasn't maybe popular thing to do in 1984 when you did. And tell us about that experience, because like you, it seems like you didn't have military people in your family. I did, but I didn't know because nobody talked about it, Don. Like my grandfather, my Italian grandfather, Dominic Coppola, was a mechanic in World War II in the South African theater, and he actually found a part in the planes that was making him crash on the runways. And I only know this because I found an article from a newspaper in Philly from 1942 saying how he and another gentleman had discovered this. Never talked about it. They all came home, didn't talk about it. And that's something that was part of our family narrative. But so you joined, it wasn't really part of your family culture, your background, but you had a lot of experiences there. So let's talk about, and I think we have a really cool collage here too. Let's talk about one of your best experiences looking back on your Air Force career, which was stellar. I mean, you made colonel, as you said. You went to National War College. For people out there that don't have an appreciation for this, National War College, when you look at the different military kind of advanced schools, that is number one, the top tier. And to have a weather guy get selected for that is pretty significant. So tell us about lots of cool pictures there. I know that went fast. You know, you in your uniform and in all kinds of different theaters, commanding a base out in the Middle East. Tell us about your best experience.
My best experience was at War College. And you're going to laugh when I tell you the story, because this just gives you an idea of how much I try to have fun. So when I got to War College, we were the smallest college of all the colleges, right? You had the Air Force, the Army, the Navy, you had ICAF, Industrial College of the Air Forces, and you had National War College. We were the smallest. And we used to have to go to, every year we went to Jim Thorpe and had a big sports activity. And I decided at War College that I was going to lead the softball team, and we never win. We always got our butt kicked because we weren't big enough. You know, we had the best golf team, you know, but and so I have to tell you, we had a couple of guys on that team. We had we had a guy who played in the minors in AAA. We had and I led that team, and we went up to Jim Thorpe and we crushed the Army 6-15, and then against the Air Force, we beat Air Force. They were shocked. I hit 5 home runs, a double. I drove in 15 runs in that game. So that was my best day in the Air Force. No,
I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was. Bragging rights. Fun fact, I did not go to National. I went to Airborne College, and the year that I was class of 2010. And only one of 26 females, by the way, in that entire class of 260.
Wow.
I was supposed to be on the golf team. Yeah, in 2010, 26 females. Think about that for a second.
That's amazing.
It is. And I actually wound up having surgery before that trip, so I wasn't able to go. So that was a bummer. I never got any bragging rights. I didn't know anything about golf. I'm just like, yeah, I'll just join the golf team. But wow. So tell us about
your worst things.
What's that?
There's a lot of things. You know, I could go, you know, running the base was a great experience.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, helping to build the Afghan army, going to visit them, calling all the troops out to find out if they were really multi-ethnic, diverse force, and finding out by asking them directly they weren't, and the general was panicking that I was going to go back and tell Rumsfeld. You know, I go on, but the bottom line is the worst experience was after I got out of War College, they sent me to Joint Staff, and you know, they wanted me to build the Afghan National Army, and I was an Air Force guy. I didn't even know what a battalion was.
Well, and you were a weather guy. You're not only an Air Force guy, you were a weather guy.
Right. Now, the good thing about weather is that weather people need to understand every weapon system in the Air Force and in the Army. Because, by the way, you don't know this, but Air Force weather supports the Army also. So the one good thing is that, and they didn't tell me that. That was the other thing they didn't tell me when I joined, right? They didn't say, I even told them I didn't join the Army. I joined the Air Force. Well, that's too bad. You might get an Army assignment. But the bottom line is that the one advantage I had is I understand all the weapon systems, right? Because weather impacts every weapon system, which is what we're applying now to TruWeather, right? We understand how everything's affected by weather because it's mission critical, and we have to try to optimize use of all our military assets and force. But when I got there, there was a lot of newness, right? In this whole environment of military strategy. I got a good training at school, good education, but I had to learn what the Army vernacular was. And I had to do it credibly as a lieutenant colonel. And what happened was General North, who's another one of my heroes, because he believed in me, he was the CENTAF commander and later became the PACAF 4-star. He picked me to come over. And he actually gave me, and I know people aren't going to understand this, but he actually got me promoted below the zone because he took one of his coveted early promotion recommendations and gave it to me when I came to Joint Staff, even though I had only just joined. And he took it away from fighter pilots, all right, to give to me. So already I was not well liked on the Joint Staff because I even had a fighter pilot come up to me and go, "What are you doing here? Why are you taking our promotions?" I said, well, what are you doing here? You're just the technician that flies an aircraft. Anybody can learn how to do technical work. What do you know about military strategy and policy? I mean, that was my New York coming out of me. But the bottom line is that I really was starting to have that imposter syndrome. And it got really, really bad for a while because I really was struggling. I had to work a lot of hours. There was a lot of classified stuff I couldn't take home. So I couldn't really, work at home and get caught up. And it took me about 6 months to get out of that muck. And finally, it all just went boom. And that's where I turned gray mostly.
Wow.
And after that, once I figured it out, then all of a sudden it was Katie barred the door, right? But that was the worst experience in my Air Force career. And it really challenged me. And again, I think learning how to work through that and being resilient and not giving up and believing that you could do it, even when you believe you can't do it, that's what's really built me to run this company. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty in building a company, right? And you don't have money coming in like you did in the government. So, you have to believe in what you're doing because it's so easy to give up and run out of money. And so I think all those experiences have really prepared me for this.
Well, and I think, it all comes down to what your theme is, your passion, right? So
Right.
Let's talk about TruWeather Solutions, because when you were in the Air Force, whether working for the Joint Staff or, as a commander out there at Manas, you did some groundbreaking work. And then, let's not forget, everybody, by the way, because I know Don pretty well, he became not only a colonel in the Air Force, but then had a follow-on career in the National Weather Service, one of those 4 paths you can go to as a weather person, where he was in the Senior Executive Service, SES. For those that don't know what that is, it's kind of the equivalent of a general officer or a flag officer in the military. So very high-powered civilian exclusive position that you held there in the National Weather Service for a number of years. You saw so many things, and all of this informed your thought process on why TruWeather Solutions needed to exist. So tell us that kind of value proposition, why you created the company, and then I want to get into some of your tips to new entrepreneurs, because like I said, Don, we're going to run out of time, and we are. So tell us a little bit about that, your value proposition, the origin story, if you will, for TruWeather, and then I want to get into some tips. And while we're doing this, if we could please roll that picture of Don at the UAS Summit and Expo. It's a more recent picture, but go ahead, Don. Tell us the origin story.
So when I in the military, I did some work on Tanker Aircraft Control Center. We actually won the Air Force Team Chief of Staff Team Excellence Award for Air Mobility Command, and were nominated at the headquarters level because we figured out that whether we were dropping good missions on the floor, most of the decision makers were not using weather properly, and we came up with a method to try to get them to focus more on how to use the weather properly and making go, no-go decisions. So we were flying 100,000 airlift missions a year and averaging 5,000 weather delays a year. Wow. And in 1 year, using the framework that I developed around risk management and better integration and decision support, working specifically with the end user, we cut that to 1,800, and we saved the Air Force $200 million, and we proved that 40 or 50% at that point of all weather delays were unnecessary. And that really gets back to our economy. $634 billion is the cost of weather on the U.S. economy, and I know 30% that's recoverable today. But the problem is getting people to see and use the data in the proper way. So that was the first element of TruWeather, was how do we take the data we have and get folks to use it properly to recover that loss of cost that they are experiencing. I left the military, went to the Weather Service, and started seeing all the science and technology that was on the shelf. And I had $130 million budget. I deployed the upgrade to all the national weather radars for dual polarization, which allows us now to see tornadoes on the ground and the size of hail and all that. And I learned that the government was becoming a choke point in getting technology out. Now, this is not a revelation. You know, everybody knows that. But the thing is I decided to do something about it, right? Which is a little different. You know, once I learned all the science and technology trapped in universities, and once I realized that one of the biggest shortfalls we have is collecting low altitude observations, and this was before I knew we were going to do drones and air taxis, but I knew that there was a book that came out, a study came out in 2009 saying weather and climate from the ground up. And they basically said that you had to collect 400 profiles of the atmosphere below 5,000 feet in order to really solve the microweather problem. And we can never get there. The government was cutting ground-based observing. And I realized at that point that this was not the path. And then it came down to one day sitting in a room with senior leaders above me in NOAA with some outside people coming in and me recognizing they listened to them more than they listened to me internally. So I said, okay, the way to solve this problem is to get outside and put pressure back on the system. So that's what I did. So I left, and it's been 12 years almost in the making, 10 years. And where we are right now is over the last 10 years, I developed a company. I've influenced the new standards for weather through ASTM. The FAA is buying into it. We're moving from a data, certifying weather instruments to data performance standard. People told me I was crazy, that I'd never be able to influence that. We are now getting a worldwide audience on this. I'm going to Israel next week because I was invited by the Civil Aviation Authority based on the standard. And then we're building our platform and our Fusion platform that can turn lots of weather information into simple decisions, which we already have as a SaaS platform. And we have lots of customers. And now we're embarking on thinking about how to roll out a national network of sensors that are not ground-based. Keep in mind, the ground is not the problem. It's what's happening above the ground. Only 3% of the country, we know what the ceiling height really is and the visibility. And that's because we measure it at airports. And we only have 3% of the the atmosphere below 5,000 feet where we actually measure winds every day. And that's just aircraft landing at airports. We estimate most everything that goes on in the lower atmosphere. We have better measurements above that because satellites do a good job of seeing the weather and getting that in our models. That's why our forecast skill has improved so much globally. But the micro weather, we keep trying to do machine learning and all these techniques, but it's like trying to get blood out of a stone. It's just not the answer. So the answer is getting better data. And that's what we're focusing on right now in our next part of our journey.
You've just kind of grown TruWeather so much from the beginning, and just watching you roll out the statewide weather service in North Dakota. I know that was the picture of you at the UAS summit this past October at, in Grand Forks, North Dakota, with Grand Sky and Tom Soren and the team there, and some of the things you're doing with Weather Scout and things. More to follow, everybody. Stay tuned. There's going to be some good articles coming out, possibly by me, about TruWeather. But, this is a great segue as we kind of get towards the end of the show, Don. I can't let you off the hot seat because I have to ask every guest about this. I think it's so critical because we have these amazing leaders like yourself, in your case, leading from your passion that started when you were a very, very young boy. How do you have balance in your life? I mean, that is one of the most difficult things. And so, life versus family, tell us a little bit about that, how you do that. And I think we have a great picture here as well.
Well, the way I do it is I always tell my son, you're not seeing a lot of me now, but you're going to have some money when I die. No, I'm just kidding. So it's really hard. I mean, look, when you build a business, and you're doing what we're doing, which is very transformational, basically disrupting the weather industry, and you feel like you're in a place in time in history where this is your calling to do this, because you don't want to see the same old continue and lose the lessons you learned and have them fall in the waste bag of history. It takes a lot of energy. And what I always tell people is, what I try to do is when I do have my family, when I do have my granddaughter over, who you saw there, and she'll come over for weekends, I don't do anything else. I just 100% focus on them. Again, I wish I could spend more time with them. I'm planning on doing that here as soon as I get this next round of money raised and I hire more people, and I have a plan to extract myself from the muck every day. But I haven't really been as good at this as I like to be, but I do try to, make sure the time I spend with them is focused and that they're getting 100% of my attention. And I think that's the best I could do. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do. I'm just saying that's the best I could do.
And that was a picture of your son that we just saw. Is that your granddaughter as well?
Yes.
So
She's
adorable.
amazing. She's smarter than me. She's smarter than me. So.
Well, I love that. She's got a great role model there. So we do have a question I want to ask you real quick, and then I want to ask you, what do you do to maintain that balance? I know you said you focus, laser focus that time that you have together. But aside from that, I'm going to ask you one more, and then we're going to do the lightning round. But before we get to that, we have a question. I do want to ask it. What about working with the major Part 121 carriers to grab real-time data off tens of thousands of flights that occur every day? Could that data be collected and monetized is the question.
Well, we do collect data off of aircraft today, TAMDAR and AMDAR data, and that is being brought into the system. I think the question is how do you make every aircraft a sensor for weather, right? And what we're focusing on right now is in our test bed in Virginia is using drones as sensors, but not necessarily requiring every drone to put a weather sensor on them, right? And there's ways to do that by backing out telemetry and flight control information and turning that into weather information. I think that's going to be the solution. Can it be monetized? Yes, it can be. It depends on the quality, and that's what we're working on with the standards. So we'll be able to tell you what tier data quality you have coming off of any drone, and we can then give you some metadata, and then you can put that on the market, and the market will drive the pricing, right? It depends on the value of it. But the answer is yes, and that's what we're trying to do with TruWeather. We're trying to set up a marketplace also for this data to get it out and get it into UTMs and make sure that it's safe, though. That's the key. I'm not going to allow the Wild West where anyone can throw data into a system that we don't know how good it is, because that's the worst thing we could do. We're seeing some of this already with these bloggers and things, putting out garbage. And if we don't maintain the integrity of the system for weather, garbage will get in the system and then it'll become unsafe. So that's what we're working with the FAA and NASA on.
Excellent. So 2-minute warning. We're going to have 1-minute answer, and then I'm going to do a 1-minute lightning round. Okay. So here's your 1-minute answer to this question. It's not really a 1-minute answer possible, but I'm going to throw it out there as that anyway. How do you maintain your, kind of your balance, your physical, emotional, spiritual, mental well-being? That's really hard to do, isn't it?
Well, it's hard to do. I love weather to me is a hobby. So that's my hobby. So I don't have to, I play softball, I listen to music, and I work out. So I always try to get my workouts in. I'm pretty good health. I'm pretty good, keep myself in pretty good shape. I get my sleep. I try to get my 7 hours a night, no matter what. And I try to eat well. My partner keeps putting food in front of me during the day when I'm working to make sure I'm eating well. She's really been my, my rock in this, a partner in this. And you can't do this alone, right? It's not possible. So I think overall I keep myself pretty emotionally balanced and focused, but you've seen me work, but I guess I'm built for it, right? I think I've kind of trained myself to operate like this, and I'm pretty good emotionally, pretty good health-wise.
That's awesome. I think getting to the gym is key. It's something I just started up again, COVID, maybe just go on walks outside, not in the gym. And even when it opened back up, I was like, I'm good. But, getting back in the gym was a game changer for me. It's just so huge mentally. It just physically in every way. I totally agree. And having people around you that support you, Don, is like absolutely key. All right, lightning round. We are at time, but we're doing this anyway. Number 1 favorite book, quick.
Oh, Animal Farm.
All right, very good. Not even going to ask why.
It's so applicable. It's so applicable to what's happening. If you don't know what Animal Farm is out there, you should read it.
Absolutely. Good stuff. All right, number 2, your hero.
Well, hero. George Washington, I love the guy. I love him. And I love Benjamin Franklin because he was jack of all trades, and he started, he flew a kite in a thunderstorm. I mean, that's
well,
crazy.
And he was in Philly, so say no more, right? And number three, we'll close with this, Don. What is one leadership tip that you learned along the way that you would love to pass along to others?
Always believe in best intentions of somebody, no matter what you hear. People generally are trying to do the right thing. You might misinterpret them. They may be under stress. I give them more than enough opportunity to demonstrate to me that they are the person I think they are. And I play by baseball rules, 3 strikes and you're out, right? So, you know, I do have to cut the losses at some point, but I think you got to trust your people. You got to empower your people. You got to recognize that, you know, the way you're communicating and the way they're receiving information may not be the way you think. And you got to take responsibility for that communication. You got to take responsibility for why your people aren't achieving what you need them to achieve. And you got to be introspective about that. So I think that's the best leadership tip I could give, because if you have your people behind you, it's amazing what you can get done.
Absolutely. It is a team sport, right? So, Don, thank you so much for taking this time with us today. I've worked with you a lot over the last couple years, and every time I talk to you, I learn something new. So you helped me with my lifelong learning. So thank you for that. Thank you, everybody that was out there. Jonathan was out there in the chat, a couple others. Really appreciate y'all. That is all she wrote. We are out here. We'll see you again soon.